standing on the deck of a warship. The sea is calm, but the air is thick with tension. Suddenly, the thunder of cannon fire erupts. The air fills with choking smoke, and splinters of wood slash through flesh like arrows. It is October 21st, 1805, off Cape Trafalgar. Here, in one of the greatest naval battles in history, Britain's Royal Navy faces the combined might of France and Spain. The outcome will decide more than the fate of ships and sailors. It will determine the future of Europe. This is the Battle of Trafalgar. Background: Europe on the edge of invasion. By 1805, Napoleon Bonaparte had become the master of continental Europe. Austria, Prussia, and much of Italy had already fallen under his shadow. Only Britain stood in defiance, shielded by the English Channel and the strongest navy in the world. Napoleon's plan was bold. He would invade Britain itself. But to land his army, he first needed to drive off the Royal Navy. To do this, he relied on Admiral Pierre-Charles Villeneuve, leading 18 French ships of the line, and Admiral Federico Gravina, commanding 15 Spanish ships. Together, the Allies had 33 ships of the line, crewed by roughly 30,000 sailors and soldiers. Opposing them was Vice Admiral Horatio Nelson, Britain's most celebrated naval commander. Already victorious at the Nile in 1798 and Copenhagen in 1801, Nelson knew that Britain's very survival depended on him. Horatio Nelson, brilliant, daring, and unconventional. Known for breaking the rigid rules of naval warfare, he preferred bold strikes over cautious maneuvering. Though he had lost an eye at Calvi in 1794 and an arm at Santa Cruz in 1797, Nelson remained fearless. His charisma inspired absolute devotion. Pierre-Charles Villeneuve. A cautious leader, capable but plagued by indecision, he recognized his crews lacked British discipline and training, yet Napoleon's orders left him no choice but to risk battle. Federico Gravina, the Spanish admiral, respected and brave, but commanding a navy that had declined in quality since its golden age. Gravina's personal courage would be tested to its limits at Trafalgar. The calm before the storm. By October, the French and Spanish fleet anchored at Cadiz, Spain. Villeneuve hesitated, dreading Nelson's blockade. But under pressure from Napoleon, who accused him of cowardice, Villeneuve finally sailed out on October 20th. Nelson, with only 27 ships, was heavily outnumbered. Yet he planned to fight not with numbers but with tactics. His strategy, later known as the Nelson Touch, was revolutionary. Instead of engaging in parallel lines, he would split his fleet into two attacking columns. These would smash directly into the enemy line, breaking it into fragments and forcing close-quarters battles, where British gunnery and discipline gave them the edge. On the morning of October 21st, as the fleets closed, Nelson ordered a signal hoisted across his flagship, HMS Victory. England expects that every man will do his duty. A roar of cheers swept the British line. The moment of destiny had come. The battle begins. The French and Spanish fleets stretched in a massive line across the horizon. The sea was calm, the winds light. At midday, Nelson's two columns advanced slowly. Admiral Collingwood, leading the leeward column in Royal Sovereign, struck first, smashing into the line and firing a devastating broadside into the Spanish flagship Santa Ana. Minutes later, Nelson's Victory plunged into the thick of the fight, targeting Villeneuve's Bucentaur. The opening exchanges were brutal. As the British ships advanced, they endured heavy fire. Splinters tore through crews, rigging collapsed, and decks ran with blood. Yet the British pressed on, determined to close the distance. Chaos and carnage. The neat lines of battle quickly dissolved into chaos. Nelson's tactics worked. The Franco-Spanish formation collapsed into confusion. Dozens of ships became locked in savage duels, hammering each other at point-blank range. The mighty Santísima Trinidad, the largest warship afloat, carried around 140 guns after upgrades. She fought desperately but was battered by repeated broadsides until she surrendered. Villeneuve's Bucentaure was dismasted and reduced to a wreck, its decks carpeted with dead and wounded. Gravina, aboard Príncipe de Asturias, fought courageously but suffered grievous wounds from cannon fire. The French Redoubtable closed with victory and unleashed musket fire from her rigging, sending deadly shots onto Nelson's deck. Everywhere, masts crashed into the sea, fires spread across gun decks, and men fought hand-to-hand with pistols, swords, and boarding pikes. Though outnumbered, the British gunnery was devastating. Trained crews fired 2 or even 3 broadsides in the time it took their enemies to fire 1. This sheer rate of fire slowly crushed the French and Spanish resistance. The death of Nelson. At the height of the battle, tragedy struck. Around 1:15 p.m., a French sniper from Redoubtable fired into victory. The musket ball struck Nelson in the shoulder, tore through his lung, and lodged in his spine. He collapsed. Carried below decks, he knew at once he was mortally wounded. As surgeons worked helplessly, Nelson asked repeatedly about the progress of the battle. Hours later, as the tide of battle turned decisively, he was told that victory was assured. His final words were calm and resolute. "Thank God I have done my duty." Nelson died at 4:30 p.m., just as the guns of Trafalgar fell silent. The outcome. By evening, the Franco-Spanish fleet was shattered. Of their 33 ships of the line, around 22 were captured, destroyed, or lost, including several wrecked in the storms that followed. The British lost not a single ship. Casualties told the story of the lopsided victory. Allied losses: over 4,400 killed, 2,500 wounded, and 7,000 to 8,000 captured, more than 13,000 men in total. British losses: 458 killed and 1,208 wounded, about 1,666 in all. It was one of the most decisive victories in naval history, but it came at the cost of Britain's greatest admiral. Aftermath and legacy. Trafalgar ended Napoleon's dream of invading Britain. Never again would he challenge the Royal Navy for command of the seas. Britain's supremacy at sea was now unchallenged and would remain so for more than a century. The fates of the opposing commanders tell the story of Trafalgar's lasting impact. Villeneuve was captured and returned to France. Months later, he was found dead in a roadside inn, stabbed 7 times. Officially, it was ruled a suicide, but many suspected darker motives. Gravina, gravely wounded during the battle, survived the fighting but died on March 9, 1806, from complications after his injuries. Nelson, preserved in a cask of brandy for the journey home, was buried with full honors at St. Paul's Cathedral in London. His funeral in December 1805 was a national event, cementing his status as Britain's eternal naval hero. Nelson's column in Trafalgar Square still stands today as a symbol of the victory that safeguarded Britain and reshaped the course of world history. Why Trafalgar mattered. The Battle of Trafalgar was more than a clash of ships. It was a turning point. It shattered Napoleon's ambitions, safeguarded Britain's independence, and ensured the Royal Navy's dominance of the seas for over a century. It was a battle of innovation, courage, and sacrifice. And at its heart was Horatio Nelson, a leader who gave his life at the very moment of triumph. Trafalgar's legacy endures as a reminder that sometimes the fate of nations can turn on the winds of battle. If you've enjoyed this journey into one of history's most epic battles, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more stories from the past. And tell me in the comments, if you were at Trafalgar, would you rather be below deck manning the cannons or high in the rigging under fire from enemy muskets?